Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll be checking out the new update for Logic Pro 11. We're officially out of the 10, the Logic Pro X era, and we're moving into a whole new frontier with, you guessed it, AI features. I mean, it's 2024 and all. Everything has to have AI. Hopefully there's AI in this update that will help me hang the studio foam that you see on the floor behind me. It's been there for about a week. If not, I'll settle for stem splitting or a usable sample browser. So this upgrade is a free upgrade for current users, which is pretty cool of Apple, to be honest, because usually whole number upgrades cost a little bit of money. Kind of seems like they're taking a page out of FL Studio's playbook. Good job, Apple. Take note, Ableton. So before I get into the more in-depth overviews for the new features in Logic 11, here's a quick bird's eye view of what I think are some of the more notable additions to the update. We now have stem splitting directly in Logic. If you're new to the stem splitting world or concept, it was really popularized in the past couple years with services like lalal.ai, pay a monthly fee. You can then drag and drop stereo 2 tracks into the stem splitter, and it will spit out the individual elements, maybe vocals, drums, or accompanying instruments. So we have that directly in Logic. I believe the only other DAW that has this currently is FL Studio, so that's pretty cool of Apple to do this so quickly. We have two new additions to the Studio series of plugins in Logic Pro. Previously, we had Studio Horns and Studio Strings. We now have Studio Bass and Studio Piano. Now, these new plugins, these Studio series plugins, they are meant to work with the new generative AI content that Apple has introduced in the update as well, and that's being billed as the session players, a personalized AI-driven backing band. So think of these as like the old session drummer, but with some AI steroids sprinkled in for good measure. All right, next up, we have a new addition to the Chroma series of mixing plugins. I guess Apple's gonna turn this into a series because we have ChromaVerb. Now we have ChromaGlow. Apple's billing this as a AI-driven mixing tool or plugin that allows you to blend some of the most sought-after studio hardware into your signal. All right, so I think it's good practice before you update Logic. This has bit me in the butt a couple times. Go to your actual applications folder, right-click on the actual Logic Pro application and compress it. Basically, just give yourself a zipped archived version of the stable version you've been using that all your current sessions are in. In case the new update breaks any of your old sessions, you can have that other one to go back to in case you need it. I don't want this video turning into a talking manual. I think the best way to showcase these new features in Logic 11 is to see how they impact my music making process with the hopes that that will inform your process as well. So I'm gonna make a couple different tracks or sections of tracks in this video to test out these new features. First up, we're gonna make a track that has some bass in it because on my best day, I'm a slightly above novice bass player. So to kill the three birds with one stone that I'm going for, I thought I'd remake a song with a prominent bass line. And by recreating the song, not only am I going to have access to the stems for the stem splitter to test the quality of the stem splitting, I can also check out one of the new session players, the session bass player, and see if it is a better replacement for a kind of a mid-tier novice bass player in myself. So in a serendipitous twist of fate, I heard Bruno Mars' Treasure earlier today when I was standing in line at the grocery store, so that's what I'm going to remake. So I already have the drums laid out, which we'll check out here. So let's lay down the bass. I'm not going to be able to play this all in one take. I'm going to kind of split it up. I'm going to do the main bass line really quick first. And then I'm going to get in the kind of slap sounding tones separately, and then I'm going to Frankenstein it together. All right, and here are the two bass tracks Frankenstein together. All right, so that is the bass. Let's grab the guitar now. A bit of EQ, just a simple compressor, just to kind of make the pick of the guitar hit a little bit harder to get that funk tone. Added a little bit of reverb on a bus send, just some Valhalla room, and I panned it to the right. Here's what we have for the guitar. And to finish it off, we're going to put in the saw lead on top of the saw chords. All right, so here we have the actual 2-track stereo in a new session in Logic, and I'm going to show you how you can use the stem splitter. So obviously drag it into your timeline, onto an audio track, and then you're going to right-click or control-click, and you're going to go down to Processing, and you're going to select Stem Splitter. Now again, you need to have a M1 series Mac for this feature to be available to. If you don't, it won't be there. Now, we can select what we want to extract from our 2-track stereo stem. So there's no vocals in this track, so we're going to just turn that off. Let's have it just take the sum of the parts, right? We have drums, bass, and other. Let's hit submit. Let's hit split, and we get this. Woo! That's pretty good, right? And now we have the drums, the bass, and the guitar / synths. So it doesn't sound as good as the actual stems, which I have here. Here's the bass from the actual recording. There's less transient. It's kind of some smudging. The drums have some artifacts, but they actually have more high frequency, which is kind of interesting. And then the guitar lost a little bit of transient as well. But overall, super, super impressed with that stem split. That's as good as pretty much anything I've heard on. All right, so let's extract the vocals from just this track here.
Last night we let the liquor talk. I can't remember everything we said, but we said.
I'm gonna right click, stem split, and now just choose only vocals, and let's see how Logic handles this. So it's gonna take a little bit longer because this track is a little bit longer, but I'm still really impressed with the speed, and we're there already there.
Last night we let the liquor talk. I can't remember everything we said, but we said it all. All
right, so now we're gonna try it on a complete electronic genre. We're going into the kind of stutter house techno world for this. And let's right click, stem splitter, and let's just see, there's no vocals, so we'll just do drums, bass, and other. Let's see what it does. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna mute the drum track from the last stem we just split. And I'm gonna reintroduce drums using the new AI assisted session player track. So go to track, select new session player SI track. Obviously, for this example, I'm gonna choose drummer, but this is where you could choose between bass player and keyboard player. I'm gonna make sure I'm starting with the genre that makes sense. So modern house, hit create, and we're off and running. We're gonna make this pattern line up with my actual pattern, and let's solo this and take a listen. So if you've ever used the old session drummer in Logic, this will be pretty familiar to you, but there's a lot more control now, and I actually think this makes it much more usable for pretty much any genre. Now, the actual sound being generated by the session player, whether you have an electronic drum machine session player loaded up or the new bass player or keyboard player, that will be determined by the plugin over here on your actual track. So here we have the drum machine designer generating these sounds. Now, these sounds probably won't work super well with this track. I'd have to change them out and swap them out, but we're more focused on the session player controls here. Now, within the session player, you can access this by double clicking on it, and you'll be looking at your session player controls, kind of like a MIDI region. Now, this isn't MIDI, it's not audio, it's its own thing if you've never used it. So here we have different presets. They'll give us different starting points. Right, give you a better starting point depending on maybe what you're after. I'm just gonna go to Furious 4. Now, down below, we have the section where we can change our drummer. We can change our type, basically. We can change between these electronic modes, the hip hop, the alternative. We can also change to different session players, acoustic drummer, percussionist, bass player, etc. Now, kind of similar with the older version of the session drummer in Logic, we have this complexity and intensity slider. So if I turn down the complexity, you'll notice that there's just less going on in our pattern. It's not even like a house pattern anymore. And if I turn down the intensity, it's kind of like turning down your velocity control in MIDI. So we're gonna turn that back up to its default. So that doesn't really help me. I need more of a control over the sound, right? And over what it's generating. For instance, if we go and we mute some of these different elements and we just focus in on our kick, I don't like this double kick. Now, I have two ways to really change this. I can first go to the details tab here and mess around with these sliders. These sliders are kind of a bi-directional slider where I can turn up at the top, down at the bottom, and I can make them meet up, right? So I could get this to kind of just have 4 kicks, every bar, like so. Or I could go to the manual pattern creator and pencil in the pattern that I actually want. Now let's go back to details. Go back to main, sorry. You'll see that it says manual pattern. So if we turn on hi-hat again, you'll notice that I have a manual pattern for my kick and for these groups, this cluster of sounds where we have kick, snare, and clap. But this section cluster of sounds where we have our starting of our kind of, I don't want to say percussion, but the hi-hats, right? We have hi-hats, shaker, and rides, those are still being generated by the actual rhythm generator within the session player. So it's cool that you can now combine both of those elements, right? We can have a manual pattern creation, and let's get a clap in there now. Let's turn this on, get a clap, clap, and now we're going back to the main tab. We can see we have a manual pattern for our kick and clap, but we're using one of the generated, AI-generated patterns for our hi-hat. And we can go to our details tab, and we can mess around with the complexity slider here for our hi-hat. So it's super flexible now, which I absolutely love. And I don't want this to turn into a giant glazing session for this, but I think this is incredible. I think what Apple did with this is, it just works. It's just easy to use now. Now over on the right, on our details tab, we have these knobs. We have feel, dynamics, and humanize. Humanize will just make the pattern a little bit more imperfect. We also have the dynamics, which will change basically how hard everything is when you start to mess around with humanize and your intensity sliders. And of course, we have the new knob, which I absolutely love, the pull and the push. This will just change the pocket of the drums. Check this out. So this will basically be standard timing. Now I push it. So let's push slightly ahead of our click, and then this will be way tighter on the pull. Slightly before it, which kind of makes it sound, it just gives it a whole different vibe. It's kind of tense, right? So yeah, between the push and the humanize, you can definitely introduce some really nice swing elements to your tracks. Now, let's say you get something going like this where you're like, okay, I like this, but I still want to, tweak it with MIDI, or I want to do something that's more standard. Super easy to do, barely an inconvenience. You can just right click on this, you're going to convert, and you're going to convert this to a MIDI region, and now it's a MIDI region. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the Studio Bass plugin in Logic Pro 11. This is an absolutely banger plugin. I mean, this is probably one of the more in-depth sample bass plugins Apple's released inside of Logic, I think, probably ever. So when you load it up by default, you're going to have access to these different basses. There are 6 different basses: classic, 60s, rock, session, modern, and an American upright. 5 of them are electric. 1 of them is obviously not electric, the upright. Now with these different basses, they're actually samples of an actual bass, like a P bass or a J bass. And in that example, we have accurate controls on the main tab. You'll notice that this bass down here, if you look, it has these 2 knobs. We have 2 knobs there. If we go to one of the other basses, like the session bass, you'll notice that there are more knobs. We have more knobs. So these, I wish they had like a little info tab, kind of like Spectrasonics does, so you can get a little information about what the studio bass is used for, which one, what type of tone is better for certain genres, that sort of thing. But just play around with it and take a quick listen, and you'll get an idea. Now, for this example where I'm trying to recreate a bass line, this bass line from Treasure, I'm going to use one of the bass modes, there's only 2 that give me access to a slap finger style or playing style. Most of them just give you 2 playing styles, finger and pick. So I want slap for this. I've already penciled in the MIDI. So let's take a listen. Let's mute our original bass. That's really good for a bass plugin. Let's change this to classic now, because that also has slap. I like the tone on that a lot. Now, we can go to our details tab and dial in more about how the bass is going to play back. Things like string noise, scrapes with certain basses, hum and hiss, and release noise. I want a pretty tight release with this, and I don't want it to play any open strings because there are no open strings in the original progression. Now, I can go and change the articulation as well. This is going to be something that you need somewhat of an understanding about bass to really know. I'm going to leave that alone for this video because we're just going to rock with what I've got going on in my MIDI. I don't know if it's better than mine. It's just a different vibe. I think it's definitely cleaner. It's played better, but I don't know if the tone is right, but I could probably get the tone to be there. This is just an excellent plugin to have at our disposal in Logic. Now, if you're wondering, why didn't I use the session player for this? Well, the session player is not going to excel at creating recreating a specific bass line when you have one in mind. It's going to excel at helping you generate ideas. Now, I do want to show you a couple things about the bass player. So we're going to delete this. And we're going to just forget about Bruno Mars Treasure. We're going to create a new track. We're going to go to new session player. We're going to choose bass, and let's actually choose retro rock. Hit create. And so we're out of the Bruno Mars vibe, and let's just listen to what this gave us. Let's move this over. Let's change the preset. Now, if you're wondering, well, how is it playing, know what chords to play? That is going to be because of our Chord Track. This is a new feature in Logic Pro 11. Hit G on your keyboard and you'll get access to the Chord Track. This is going to allow the session players, both for the bass and the keys, to follow an actual chord progression. So right now, right here, we are starting at C, down to F, G sharp, right? So let's go and change this initial chord. We're going to change this to a whole other chord. Let's go F. Right? And that will change our chord progression. So that's how you can actually create session players that will follow a chord progression. It's something that you maybe already have in mind, or maybe you're working with other MIDI, whatever the case may be. So now we're going to check out the new studio piano inside of Logic Pro 11. And to do that, let's pull up the session player track, choose keyboard player, and let's just keep this simple. Let's do block chords for now. And this will pull in the session player as well as the Studio Grand. So I feel like we've covered the general idea or concept with the session player enough in this video. So let's focus more on the actual piano plugin itself. So if we go and change it to the Studio Grand, you can see that we have 3 different microphones to choose from: stereo mic A, stereo mic B, and a mono mic. So let's turn off stereo mic A and B and turn on only the mono mic. Let's check out stereo mic B. If you turn up the key noise, it'll sound a little bit more organic, like you're in the room with the actual piano. The release samples will achieve a similar style or effect. We also have a sympathetic resonance control. This is the first time a piano in Logic has ever had sympathetic resonance. Usually this is something you see in Kontakt libraries or well-created piano libraries, maybe by Spectrasonics, Native Instruments, that sort of thing. I remember when I made the Loft piano, it was a pain in the ass to do. Huge learning curve, but it is worth it. It makes the piano sound more realistic. So all of the pianos in the new plugin have sympathetic resonance, as well as these key noise, release samples, and pedal noise. I absolutely love this Studio Mic A on the upright. All right, so to finish up this video, we'll be checking out the new mixing plugin, ChromaGlow. ChromaGlow is in the saturation or distortion subfolder. And when I first saw this announced, I was like, oh, okay, another saturator, harmonic exciter, cool, I guess. Now that I've used it for about a day and a half, I kind of think it's slightly magic. There's some really interesting things going on. And I thought at first Apple was just jumping on the whole AI bandwagon, like AI mixing plugin. There's some really interesting things that I think would be very hard to pull off with standard DSP. Apple has the money and resources to do it, obviously, but nonetheless, I think it's a really cool plugin. Check this out. So here it is on the bass. Now there's these different models. We have these 5 different models: retro tube, modern tube, magnetic, squeeze, and analog preamp. And then within each mode, you have a clean and colorful mode or style. So if I crank this up to 100 on the modern tube, listen in between the bass lines. There's a speaker hum that's present, and that is crazy cool. In the past couple of years, I've gotten into DSP development. It's one of the reasons why I've been MIA for so long. And the DSP ramifications of figuring out how to introduce the speaker hum as the volume subsides within the distorted circuit is pretty neat, and I haven't heard that on too many saturation distortion plugins. So that tells me something interesting is going on. Now, obviously, that's way too high. I was just showing you that as an example. But I really can't find a bad setting on this, which is kind of nice because a lot of distortion plugins, you turn something up too high and your ears are bleeding. Not so with ChromaGlow. It's kind of hard to find a spot where you're going to kill your hearing. Magnetic is really nice. Yeah, so it's just a great plugin. I think you guys should definitely try this out and use it. You do need to have an M series processor in your computer, so M1 or higher, to use this and make use of it. But the analog preamp is going to be super awesome on vocals and just pretty much everything. I'm probably going to put this on almost every track. There are some other nice features that make it a little bit more of a utility plugin as well. So you can, let's say with this bass, I don't want it touching certain frequencies. I want it just getting the high frequencies of the bass. I can crank this. I can go back maybe to modern tube, crank the drive, and now, right now I'm just applying this to the bite, to the growl of the bass, which is pretty cool. Easy to implement. Sounds great when you do. You also have a low cut and high cut, so you can further dial in the final sound. All right, so that's going to sum up this video. If you have any questions or comments, post those below. I'd love to know your favorite feature of this update. Just see what you guys generally think about the update. I mean, for free, I don't think we can complain. Ableton users just had to pay a lot of money for their update, which I don't think had as cool features as this, but I digress. There's a couple of other features I'm not going to touch on in the video. I do just want to kind of shout out as a quick honorable mention. One of those is that Apple has ditched its AIF file format. By default, it's going to WAV. Finally, it's only taken them like 30 years to figure out no one uses AIF. So that's kind of cool. There's also some spatial audio, Dolby Atmos updates and new features, but I don't do any of that. I don't know anything about it, so didn't showcase it in this video. I'm sure there's other YouTube videos about that on YouTube. Check those out if you're so inclined. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.